everyone in the band that he was leaving, which I think was a Sydney Nationals. He told everyone that he was going overseas.
He'd played many times at Northern to help out a few times on permit, and he was just the best person for the job.
Andrew turned to me at the drinks afterwards and goes, "You'll be able to do it, yeah?"
I was more than comfortable in handing the baton over to Chris, knowing that he would take it on with the same love, care and support that I did.
I thought, rubbish, bullshit, I'm not going to be able to do that.
Well, the band didn't necessarily need someone who could do everything as a conductor. We didn't need a Bob Childs or a Ben Northey or anyone like that. We needed someone who understood Northern Brass, its situation and its personnel. And Chris was the best person for that because he'd been in the band.
Chris didn't have quite the same competition success with the band that Andrew did. He certainly deserved it, and the band worked very hard and was able to improve through those years under Chris.
Well, Hobart Nationals, we were going to go on stage. And then Alex Militsas gets to signing and his name isn't there. It means he can't play. He's come all this way, he's been spending months rehearsing with us. He's got very, very important parts, he has solos, and he can't play. What are we going to do? Well, it wasn't much we could do, it was pretty straightforward. I had to give the parts to the next people down the line. So I think it was Bonnie Dawson and I think it was Ioana. Ioana Salmonidis had to both step up, and they were very good about it too. I mean, we're always very lucky to have a horn section like that where everyone could play, everyone was a good musician. Northern had started to stand on its own 2 feet. With the juniors coming up and filling in some of the holes, or the boys that were there the whole time, like Lou Morris, Andrew and Daniel McAdam, the Gallagher brothers, they kept getting better, and we kept moving them up the line, and that was the whole idea. The whole idea of having a training band is that you train players. So you can't keep relying on your A-grade superstars to be sitting on all the end chairs. The young kids have got to start stepping up, and they did. So I was so proud to have Lou playing principal corner for the first time under my baton. I thought that was very special. I was very proud of that.
And there were some contests that Chris did really well at, and I'm very proud of him for that. I don't think his contest drive was the same as mine though. I don't ever think it was his most important incentive for conducting. I think his most important reason for conducting the band was to make sure that everyone was still together and enjoying it, and we were getting players along, new players along.
National Australia Brass Youth Band on the solo horn chair.
Both the boys are playing in the National Australia Youth Brass Band, which is fantastic.
I'm just so proud of Lou Morris and Andy McAdam for being a part of it, for being chosen, I think 2 years in a row now.
Under the leadership of David King, which is an opportunity that's been amazing.
Gives us a very good name that we've got kids coming through into that sort of category, which is brilliant. That was difficult for me, picking up the band again. You know, Chris was gentlemanly enough to hand the baton back to me. And it wasn't until I stood back in a conductor's role after not having conducted for a couple of years that I remembered how difficult it was. There was a lot of personnel changes, and Chris was dealing with a different band to what I had when I left. And I needed to remember that the personnel that I had at 2009 at the Nationals in Sydney was personnel that I'd built up over 4 or 5 years worth of, you know, conducting and contest winning and all that sort of stuff. And it was a big change. I came back and I had exactly what Chris had been trying to do, which was get juniors into the band and progressing. And yeah, it was hard. There were kids who couldn't play. They couldn't play as well as the players that I had built up in the past. That I see it is that I probably got the best result that I could have out of that group at the time in that Melbourne Nationals, and that improved tenfold between that contest and the state championships the same year. We went from coming 7th at the Nationals in C grade to coming 2nd, a debatable 2nd in the Victorian State Championships in the same year. So we were definitely back onto a good path. I found myself a little bit too busy with the master's study I was doing for my teaching back at uni, so sadly had to pass it off again until I was going to finish that. So that's where Jamie came into play.